What's up, guys, and welcome back to Gabe Miller Music. Today, I am doing a Q&A. So I had you guys send some questions about audio or just about me, and you guys sent them in both varieties, so I'm going to go ahead and just jump right in. This first question is from Gret. He says, what are some quick and simple ways you can give to use Audition that will make a podcast sound awesome? Now, these tips I'm going to give apply to any digital audio workstation, not just Adobe Audition, like I'm in Logic, and pretty much whatever you're in, you'll be able to utilize these same tips. So first of all, just editing. I did a little screen cap video showing you a few techniques I use to make my vocal edits sound smooth and natural, so I'm going to play that right now. So one tip I've found very helpful when editing audio is, for one thing, to use crossfades, which I'll show you how to do it in Logic in a second, but this can be done in any DAW. It's just different depending on what DAW you're using. But the other thing is to use breaths. So here I have a little vocal test recorded, so I'll play that. This is a very exciting test. So yeah, that's all I got. So as you can hear, there's a very obvious that makes me sound dumb, and I don't want it there. So what I'm going to do is cut it out on the breath. So use the breath to lead into the part. So I'll play that one more time. You can hear that. This is a very exciting test. And there's that little gap of silence. So yeah, that's all I got. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and find this little blob right here, and I'm going to split the track and then move it up until I get to the so yeah part, and I'm going to leave a little bit of space in between, and I'll show you why in a second. So now you've got, this is a very exciting test. So yeah, that's all I got. And so what I can do now is basically use that breath to naturally lead up into the so yeah. And so I'll drag this up to it, and I have this automatically set to crossfade, and then I can also do a fade out at the end of this. Let's say I want to do that, and this little section with a fade out. So I basically have this, so basically what the crossfade is it's fading one track out and fading the other in. So you can see that here. So now when you play it, you have this. This is a very exciting test. So yeah, that's all I got. And I can even push that further, so I can take out that little gap and move this closer. And really, from here, once you kind of have the basic technique for every edit, it's just a very little bit of trial and error. And as you get experience, that trial and error becomes less and less necessary as you're able to get it right the first time. And so you can kind of move it back and forth until you get a timing that sounds natural. So now you have, this is a very exciting test. So yeah, that's all I got. And obviously, I could spend more time on this. I can move this a little bit, but that's basically the method. All right, so once you've got your podcast edited, now it is time to start processing it. Now, all this processing will only serve to take something that already sounds pretty good and make it, like, bring out what sounds really good about it. So if you have just a terrible recording, you won't be able to make it sound good. You can maybe try to kind of fix it a little bit, but that never really works. You'll still end up with a subpar result. So if you have a decent mic and a decent recording, you should be able to use a little processing to make it sound as good as it possibly can, kind of bring out what's really already good about the source. So the first tool in your arsenal for processing voiceover is EQ. So if you've ever had like a car stereo and you have like the bass boost and the mids and then the treble, and you've used a very, very basic EQ. So basically what EQ is it's a bunch of little volume sliders for the entire frequency spectrum. So on this end you have bass, and you go up, you have lower mids, and then mid-range, and then upper mids, and then treble, or high end, or highs, or whatever you want to call them. So basically what you're going to be able to do with EQ is both dial back frequencies you don't want and emphasize frequencies that maybe you need more of. So for instance, say your recording kind of lacks clarity, you can boost the high end a little bit, and you can, kind of add a little bit of clarity back in. Or let's say that your recording has a little too, this weird frequency in the upper mids that's this kind of hoggy frequency, and you don't want it. And so you can kind of, notch it out just a little bit and try to kind of control that. And once again, you cannot fix bad audio with this, but you can make good audio better. So I did a little screen cap video that I will play right now that goes a little more into how to use EQ on your voiceover. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and add an EQ. And this will look pretty much the same for every DAW. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and boost a few frequencies. Now, like I mentioned, you got to keep this subtle. It's very easy, and I have absolutely done this. It's very easy to just go overboard in the EQ department. And so you want to make sure that you're keeping it subtle. When in doubt, err on the side of subtlety. So basically, I'm going to play the audio and play it on a loop and boost around until I find a frequency that sounds good, and then dial it back to a much more reasonable amount. So here we go. This is a very exciting test. So yeah, that's all I got. Moving that loop. This is a very exciting test. So yeah, that's all I got. This is a very exciting test. And as you see, I cut that frequency. That was kind of like this nasal frequency. I cut that just a little bit, and then boosted this high end a little bit just to make it sound a little more, give it a little more clarity. And this will be different depending on the voice, and really it's just down to trial and error, and I just happen to know my voice pretty well and where the frequencies are that I like to boost and cut. So here's it now. This is a very, and here's before. This is a very exciting test, and after. This is a very exciting test. The second tool in your arsenal that you can use to process audio, and specifically in this case that you can use on voiceover to make it sound good, is compression. So here, what compression is it's essentially an automatic volume knob that turns down audio that gets past a certain threshold. So this is used to even out the volume of, let's say, voiceover. And then the second thing, to actually help shape the tone, and I'll show you what I mean by all that. That was kind of a lot of information just chucked at you, so I'll give it kind of a basic demonstration of how compression works. So here's a very crude animation of a little audio signal bouncing up and down. And let's say I want to add compression to even this signal out a bit. So I'll set my threshold. There you go. And then any audio that gets past that threshold immediately gets punched down like this. And so that will regulate the audio. And so you can set the threshold wherever you want. You can adjust that. And so basically what this will do, this will even out the volume of your speech, and also will have kind of an effect on the tone that makes it a little more upfront and in your face. And so I did a screen cap video showing me using some compression on that voiceover track, so here that is right now. Alrighty, so now we've got our compressor, and this is the built-in compressor from Logic, and the compressor plugin will look different from software to software, but they all work basically the same way. So I have it. I'll just play the signal. This is a very exciting test. This meter right here shows the bouncing audio, and it's around in between. It's in between -9 decibels and -6 decibels. So I want to set my threshold somewhere in between that. So I'm going to set this down to around 8.5. This is a very exciting test, and I can bring that even further because most of it. You'll have to play around with it, and basically what this meter right here does is it shows how much the signal is being punched down. So in other words, how much gain reduction there is, how much volume reduction there is. So whenever the little fist comes in and punches the signal, this is basically the visual equivalent of that fist. So that's what this meter is. So if I play it now with the threshold at -10.5, this is a very exciting test. Every time the needle moves, that means the compressor is punching in a little bit. If I crank this threshold way down, you'll see the needle becomes much more extreme. This is a very exciting test. And you can kind of hear that it sounds squished, so to speak. Like it has that sound to it. But then you dial it back, and it just makes it a bit more in your face and evens out all the volume. So let's do -10.5 again. This is a very exciting test. These other controls, I wouldn't worry too much about attack or release or knee. For basic voiceover stuff, you don't really need to use those much. And then for ratio controls how much the signal is reduced when it passes the threshold. If you're doing voiceover, I would recommend having it around 2 to 1. That seems to be a pretty good amount. And then finally, makeup gain is basically, since the signal is getting turned down, makeup gain allows you to turn the whole signal up a little bit, so to make up for the lost volume. And the final tool is a limiter. So a limiter is basically a compressor on steroids, and let me explain why you need it. I have to back up a little bit. Audio cannot go past a certain point. If it goes past 0 decibels within your software, it'll basically just chop it off, and that causes nasty distortion. And there is no possible way to have that sound good. It just, distortion like that, it's called clipping. It just, because it like clips the peak off the audio, and it just sounds terrible. You don't ever want clipping. So to get a voiceover loud enough to kind of like compete with all the other podcasts out there, to get it up to a nice loud level, limiter, what you can do is basically you can turn it up, and as you turn it up, the limiter will has this thing up at 0 decibels where it'll just keep the audio from going past 0 decibels. So let me show you a little demonstration of using that. And finally, we're going to move on to the limiter. I'm going to put this on my stereo bus. So basically, this is like the track that all of the audio is getting sent through. I only have one track here, so that's only getting sent. So whatever I put on my stereo bus or stereo out or master fader or whatever it's called in your software, that'll affect everything. So I'm going to add my limiter. And a limiter is basically like a compressor on steroids, and it allows me to bring up the level without distorting. So it has a built-in threshold that you can't change, and basically I can just bring the gain up until we have a nice loud volume. If you're listening on headphones, you will probably want to turn them down a bit because I'm going to bring this signal up a good bit. This is a very exciting test. So yeah, that's all I got. This is a very exciting test. As you can see, the limiter is kicking in just a little bit. You don't want it doing too much, or else the audio will once again sound squashed, and we do not want that. So just let it kick in just a little bit, and that'll have it be at a nice, loud, commercial level without distorting. And those are my 4 tips for making podcast voiceover stuff sound good. Hopefully that helped you out. This next question is from Andrew. He wants to know, what is the best/coolest thing you've done in a pool? Sorry to disappoint you, Andrew. I don't really have anything that's that great. I mean, I did an epic backflop that stung once. Most of my time in the water is spent in the ocean on a surfboard or boogie board. This next question is from Maddie. She wants to know, what is the best music software to get that is the easiest to use? So this is about to be a very long and roundabout answer, so bear with me for a second here. There is no best program. I'm assuming you mean for like creating electronic music. There is no, well, when it comes to software for creating media in general, there really is no best. There is what's best for you. So here are a few things that you can use to help determine which software is the best for you. And I'll just use me as an example using Logic Pro. So the first thing that will determine what audio software you're going to get is what computer you use. So if you use a Mac, you're kind of limited. You're not going to be using FL Studio. If you're on PC, well, you're not going to be using Logic. And there are some that are cross-platform, so programs like Ableton can work on both, and others that I'm forgetting at the moment. So that's the first limiting factor. The second thing is what is built into them. So just use myself as an example. I've been using Logic Pro for a while now, and I absolutely love it. And one of the things I love about it is how much it has built in. The value you get for your money is insane. It just has all these different kinds of synthesizers and effects and processors and stuff you can tweak. It's a very powerful program and has a whole lot built in from the get-go. You spend $200 and you get like a few $1,000s worth of software. It's incredible. And so what it has built in and how that can help you is a thing to consider. So for instance, like FL Studio has a bunch of stuff built in that Logic doesn't, and vice versa. And Ableton has stuff built in that neither has. And so there's different stuff to consider. So if you're on Mac, I would definitely recommend getting Logic just for the sheer amount of stuff it gives you to play with, the different processing and synthesizers. It gives you a lot to play with right out of the box, and you got a great value for your money there. And the third thing is workflow, and this is really down to personal preference. And so I've used various programs in the past. So I used FL for a while when I was first getting started out, and then when we switched to Mac, I switched to Logic. And for me, the workflow of FL Studio was always kind of counterintuitive and very kind of it never quite clicked with me. It was always kind of going against the way I like to create. And so when I switched to Logic, it turns out that Logic works very much with the way my brain works. And so if I have a musical idea, I can get it down very quickly and very effortlessly in Logic. And then I know that, like, it's because the two programs have such different workflows. And then I know Ableton also has a very different workflow, which is also very different from the workflow that, like, Reason has. And so really it's down to doing your research and trying to find one that you think will work with the way that you like to create. And in that way, it's very subjective. And then in terms of easiest to use, here's the thing about ease of use is that the more powerful a program is, the more of a learning curve it has. So the more that you're able to tweak and the more that you're able to do, the harder it is to wrap your head around it. And to be able to create music on a professional level, you need to be able to have control over a lot of stuff, and you need to what I'm trying to say is music creation is hard. Very, very hard. I've been doing this for three and a half years, and I consistently end up just figuratively banging my head against the wall, trying to get something to sound the way I want it to. It's difficult. You know, I've been doing this for a relatively long time, and I don't consider myself even close to where I would like to be. So there really is no easiest to use, unfortunately. It's really down to experience and learning. There really is no easiest to use. There's what could be easiest to use for you, back to the workflow thing. I could create a song in FL Studio, but it would be way harder for me to do it there than in Logic, because I know Logic really well and it works with the way my brain works. And so I would able to get a song done much more easily. And so there's definitely the aspect of easiest for you, but really creating music will be hard no matter what program you're in. That's probably not the answer you were hoping for, but hopefully that helps you out. And finally, we've got 2 questions from Gianna. She asks, first question from her, what is your favorite animal? I would have to say, just in terms of animals that are like common, I love dogs. Dogs are awesome. And then in terms of like other animals, kangaroos. Kangaroos are awesome. And final question, and the second question from Gianna. Also, on a scale from 1 to 10, how much of a pirate are you? Probably a 1. Not very exciting. Alrighty, that is it for today. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe. I'm Gabe, and I'll see you guys next week. Peace out.